Hey everyone, and this video is going to be pretty raw. I'm just recording, and the spoilers just came out, I guess, during the day in New Zealand, for which is probably going to be most of you guys who watch this video, and during the night for us on the east coast of the United States. And I wanted to get this video out for anybody who's going to be attending the Heavy Hitters World Premiere and also Calling in Queenstown, and hoping that everybody has a good event. The set looks pretty fun to play. And I know that when it was announced that the people who were invited to the celebration were going to get access to the cards a little bit earlier, it caused, I guess, a little bit of buzz or controversy, whatever you want to call it. I don't really have much of an opinion on that, but I understand why a lot of people maybe feel that they are getting the short end of the stick when it comes to competing in the tournament. So this video is for you. All right, now that we spent a minute going over that, Heavy Hitters is, you guys probably know, it's a 3-class set. I spent some time putting together kind of like the breakdown for all of the packs, which is kind of going to be, I guess most people, sealed is going to be the most relevant. So I put down what the set breakdown is, what the pack breakdown, and what a sealed pool is probably going to look like. And we'll talk about strategy in a second, but just to go over the numbers first, it looks like there's going to be 33 generics, 18 common, 9 rare, 6 majestic, 33 brute only cards, 19 common, 9 rare, 5 majestics is the same for all 3 classes. And then each of the dual class hybrid pairs have 19 cards, 12 common, 6 rares, 1 majestic. Pack breakdown, we got a look at Fluke and Box breaking a case of heavy hitters. So this is just like early on, just taking a look at the video for some of the packs to kind of get a guess. So it's not 100% accurate as of right now. But it looks like there are 5 class commons, so it's like a 2-2-1 split. There are 2 dual class cards, and then one, it should be like another dual class card, and then maybe like equipment. So I don't know if it's going to be like one of each of the pairings, or if it's random and you can get like 2 of the same pairing. I think you can get 2 of the same dual class pairing in a pack, and then you have 2 generics. And I heard that there's also block cards in this slot, maybe, and so there are some common block cards. I don't know if you can have 3 rares in a pack, so you can have like maybe like a rare. I'm not exactly sure how it goes with that slot. There's gonna be 1 equipment, 2 rare or majestic cards, and a foil card. And I believe that it's going to be similar to Bright Lights, where I don't think you can get legendaries except in the expansion slot. So as far as playing limited goes, this is basically what you have access to. I did not include any expansion slot cards. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention it, but in the set breakdown, these numbers are just for cards that go in your deck. So obviously, there's more cards than this number, but this is just like the cards that go into your deck. So for any sealed pool breakdown, if you're looking at any one class, it looks like you should, on average, get about 10 solo class commons, 12 dual class commons that you can play, 5 rares that you can play or better, 12 generics that you can play, maybe a fewer if you get equipments in those slots. And you should get about like 3 to 5 equipments between the generic equipments, dual class equipments, and then the other equipments that you choose to play with. I'm not sure if there is a 40 card maximum and in sealed or not, but it looks like you should be able to hit around 40 cards and then not really have to cut anything. But obviously there's some variance involved. So if you do get more than 40 cards that you can play in your deck, then historically it's been good to play as many cards as possible, especially when a lot of the cards in this set block 3. Um, so uh, but I think most of the time you're going to get around 40 cards. You probably play all of them. And as far as which hero that you end up choosing to play will probably be determined by how much your individual pool deviates from these averages. So if you get like a bunch of rares for a class like more than five, I would really be interested in playing that class. And if you get like we're gonna talk about this soon, but if you get like a rare weapon, that would also pull me a lot towards playing hero. And so thanks to Phil Fabry and everybody else who is kind of working on making the whole spoiler available to us. We have the full spoiler set here. I made some tabs where we did some filters, so let's just go through those. So first, let's take a look at all the heroes and see what they do. Kayo, it only gets to play one weapon, and this is mostly important because he can't play two mandible claws, unlike Reinar. And I guess it's the main disadvantage of KO is that you can only play one weapon. But on the flip side, he has pretty powerful hero ability where it says attack action cards you own get +1 while they're in any zone other than the combat chain. This is going to be useful when it comes to stuff like beat chest, so you can play beat chest and discard cards from your hand that have 5 power printed on the card because they will count as sixes. It also matters for clash because that means that your sixes beat their sixes and your fives tie with their sixes, your fives beat their fives, etc. So just overall, really powerful way to interact with the mechanics in the set. And KO also says the first time you discard a card with 6 or more power during each of your action phases, create a might token, which is also really strong. Just giving him incidental value over Reinar. So he looks to be pretty powerful to play if you get the right cards for him. And like I said, like the main downside is that you only have one weapon zone. But honestly, that's not a huge problem unless you have a pool that lets you, swing Mandible Claw twice pretty frequently. Reinar is a returning hero from Welcome to Wraith, so he has new art but same ability. Says whenever you discard a card 6 or more power during your action phase, Intimidate. Discards are not as I would say they're probably not as plentiful. Intimidate is pretty strong though. Some of the best cards in the set are block cards. That is cards with the block type. And so if you intimidate a block card, it's pretty big blowout, especially since most of these block cards, or I think actually maybe all of them, are red pitch. And so if you get them intimidated, it's pretty big blow. Reinar has 2 arms, so you can play 2 Mandible Claws, which is the token weapon for Brute. We'll go over weapons later. But that's like the other main advantage to playing Reinar over KO. The downside, obviously, compared to KO is that he's not going to win wagers as often, or not wagers. He's not going to win clashes as often, but he might be able to force through wagers with Intimidate, and that's some value off of intimidating out block cards. And we move on to Guardians. We have Betsy, whose hero ability is whenever attack you control wagers, you may pay 2, and if you do, the attack gets +1 overpower. My default is to assume a ability like this is very powerful in sealed. Usually in sealed, because you have less control over the types of cards that you have access to, you basically just like play whatever you get. Anything that offers you like incremental value per card is pretty nice. And so being able to pay resources to give attacks overpower and +1 is pretty good, especially when you combine that with wagering. And then if they don't have a block card or they don't have equipments in play, then you get additional value out of, winning the wager. Victor Goldmain says the first time each turn you create a gold token from an effect you control, draw a card, and the first time each turn you would fail to win a clash, you can destroy a gold instead. And if you do, put cards on the bottom of the owner's deck and then clash again. So Victor is kind of interesting. We have to take a look when we go through the set to see how many cards and heavy hitters actually generate gold tokens. But my initial thought is that it's actually not too easy to be generating a lot of gold tokens. And so Victor doesn't really have a much of a hero ability. Obviously, if you get like one card draw, if you get one card draw, I think he should be about break even with Betsy if you can convert the gold into something useful, like for example winning a clash. But my initial instinct is to not really want to play Victor Goldmain in sealed, at least in draft. If you do get to draft a bunch of ways to generate tokens, then I could see him being getting out of hand a little bit. Because I think as soon as you make I think between one to two golds, you're probably about break even with Betsy in terms of value. But I think once you can make three golds or more, then he just starts generating too much advantage from drawing extra cards, because every card that you draw should translate into 2 to 3 life advantage. And then we have the Warriors, Kasai, which says if you've drawn a card this turn, your sword attack costs one less to activate, and then she can also banish 2 reds and 2 yellows from her graveyard to make it so that the next time a weapon hits a hero, you get to make a gold token. And we have to go through the cards, but I think Kasai is probably going to be more powerful in constructed than in limited, because similar to Victor, like the primary way that you get access to the primary way that you activate her ability is going to be off of spending resources to break a gold, and banishing 2 red and 2 yellow cards from your graveyard to give your weapon on hits has to be seen, like how relevant that is. If you figure that in a 40 card deck you have about like 1/3 of each, then that means that you could potentially make up to, you could potentially make up to like 6 gold tokens over the course of the game. But realistically, you're not going to hit with your weapon all the time, so you probably make like 2 or 3 gold, and in which case you're getting about 2 to 3 extra points of value in Kasai. So probably gonna be dependent on how often you can get agility tokens, how often you can get go again on your weapon, attack with weapons twice. It's gonna be a big factor. And then you have Olympia, which says every time your attack wins a wager, you create a gold token. And this is, I think, a little bit hard to evaluate between Olympia and Kasai. Who is better? So gold tokens are primarily useful when you pitch blues to them, because you can get like an extra resource essentially if you had like 2 blues. Then you can hit 4 resources. So we'll have to take a look at the resource breakpoints to see if there are a lot of like 4 resource plays that come up, and in which case Olympia's hero ability might actually be pretty strong. So like the more like 0 cost go again type of effects that there are, the more 4 resource cost the more 4 resource cost plays there are, the better Olympia's hero power is compared to Kasai. But probably I would say that Kasai's hero power is a little bit more consistent, although Olympia, if you get enough wagers, maybe it'll be good. So the first thing that I think that we need to look at when we evaluate cards is the weapons, because the weapon is going to be kind of like your default play style. So each of the classes has access to 1 token weapon and then 2 rare weapons each that you can draft. Or I guess Guardian only has 1 rare weapon that you can draft. So for brutes, it's Mandible Claw, which is a card that was originally printed in Crucible of War. Now in token rarity, it says if you discard a card with 6 more power, Mandible Claw gets go again. So the main way that this is going to interact in heavy hitters is going to be through the beat chest mechanic. Although most, not most, but like a lot of the cards that beat chest are attacks themselves. So you're gonna have to find ways to discard cards. It's primarily like used, I think, as a way to like extend. So you can go like beat chest with an agility. You can go play like a beat chest attack with an agility token, and then like swing Mandible Claw, and then maybe swing like another weapon. I think playing 2 Mandible Claws is good because normally when you discard a card to get go again, then you can just treat the Mandible Claw having go again as kind of like replacing. So if you're familiar at all with Bright Light's draft, it's kind of similar to the fact that when you boost an attack and then you swing Banksy, you're kind of like neutral on cards. But if you get to swing 2 weapons in the case of Rhinar, then you get to kind of convert that card that you discarded into extra value per card that you wouldn't have otherwise gone, and which is going to be pretty useful if you're going to go to fatigue. The Guardian weapon is High Riser, which says if you draw on a card this turn, this gets +1. So this is obviously going to be kind of like the main payoff, I guess, for having gold tokens. But again, I'm not quite sure how often that is going to come up. So my thought is that High Riser is probably going to be doing 3 damage most of the time, except for in the very end game. And then we have Centauri Saber, which only costs 1 to attack, so it's free if you've drawn a card with Kasai. And it says when this is defended by 1 or more attack action cards, this gets +1. So Centauri Saber is, if your opponent is not blocking, unless you pair it with actions that give it go again, so you can swing a second sword, it's not going to be as efficient per action point. But if you have extra action points, it's going to let you convert, if you have 2 Centauri Sabers, 2 resources, into 4 damage, which is very strong, especially being difficult to block breakpoint wise. You have to spend a whole card to block 2 damage, which is not exactly where you want to be if the games end up going into fatigue. And so it's useful in that sense. I would say that for all 3 classes, the token weapons look to be not exactly the most powerful thing that you could be doing, which I think is a good thing because it means that you're going to have much more meaningful decisions when it comes to both draft and sealed, because the rare weapons, as we're about to find out, I think are actually very good. At least some of them are. And so being able to play the rare weapons, I think, makes it so that you get to actually be doing really powerful things. And I like the fact that LSS chose to do this and not offer them as base, so that the gameplay for limited is a little bit more interesting. So Ball Breaker, I believe, is going to be one of the kind of like bomb level cards that you want to be drafting, or if you open this in your sealed pool, it is going to strongly incentivize me to be playing Rhinar over Kayo. Being able to play 2 one-hand weapons just makes it so that you can, go some attack that has beat chest. If you gave it go again somehow with an agility token, then you can go Mandible Claw into Ball Breaker and then convert 4 resources into 7 damage, which is a really good rate. Do that, converting 4 resources into 7 damage. Obviously you have to discard a card to make all this possible, but then usually The cards that have beat chest also have some additional extra effect. So you end up going like pretty plus. I would say that I think Ball Breaker is going to be really powerful and limited. So if you open one in your seal pool, really give it a look. I don't know if I was playing Kayo, if I would choose to play Ball Breaker as my solo weapon over Mandible Claw. That has to get like tested out. If it ends up being the case where you actually can discard semi frequently with Go Again, I could see playing like an attack that discards and then swing for 4. Anytime you can like present a breakpoint on a weapon is just like super powerful inevitability. So yeah, that I wonder. And then you have Mini Meat Axe, which is a you pay 2 and then you get to draw a card and discard a random card. And this, I think, is probably going to not be very good in. I think this is not going to be very good in limited. Just because the main reason that you have a weapon is going to be to kind of get like card advantage, like you're pitching cards to attack for damage instead of like having to spend cards um to attack for damage. Meat axe, obviously you're gonna like run out a card every single time. The only benefit that I see out of playing mini meat axe is if you're playing Rhinar and then you can give this Go Again somehow, you can like potentially trigger like an intimidate, but I think that's going to be like a much less reliable thing in limited. So if I opened a mini meat axe in my seal pool, I wouldn't be strongly incentivized to play brute in this way. In KO, it is a little bit more interesting to play as a solo weapon because of his hero ability, which lets you create a might token when you discard a 6. And so in that case, like the mini meat axe actually does kind of convert the cards that you draw and discard into, you know, just like 4 damage. Uh and in those instances, like it might be worth considering. So that I would still have to play the games out to kind of see how the games actually end up playing and whether or not you go to fatigue too often. But you know that is something to think about. Miller's Grindstone is kind of interesting. It's like numbers wise the best weapon in heavy hitters, I think, because you know it's just A3 do 4 damage, which is just like a recipe for success. But it does say that you put -1 counters on it when you lose clashes. Now, I think that the fact that you also destroy the top card of their deck and that this is a one-hand weapon, that you can always equip this plus, you know, the other plus the token weapon makes it so that this weapon is actually extremely powerful when it comes to just presenting inevitability and the late game. So like it's not guaranteed that you put a -1 counter every time you hit. You have to lose the clash. And you know guardians are primarily going to have like the highest power attacks out of all the heroes that you play in the set. So if I opened a Miller's Grindstone, I would be, I think, heavily incentivized to be playing Guardian for this reason. You don't have to give up your token weapon, you know, to be playing this, and the amount of inevitability that it has is just so good. And you can always, you know, attack with the high riser in the early game, and then just like wait until you have, you're like getting to the end game. You're going into like fatigue, and then presenting breakpoints, both breakpoints and like milling cards from your deck becomes really strong. Hot Streak, I think, is probably one of the most powerful cards in the set for limited that I have just initially taken a look at. And I think that Hot Streak is going to be like the main pull for me to want to play Warrior in any seal pool. Like if I open one of these cards, I'm probably just going to be playing Warrior. it makes it so that when you pump the hot streak at the beginning and you like increase its attack, your opponent is probably going to be incentivized to block with it, and like, or they're just going to be taking a bunch of damage. There are some cards in the set that put wager on, and that's something that you can think about. But I think also the main reason why hot streak I think is really good is that I can imagine a situation where you just like you and your opponent are trading life totals, and then when you start getting towards like the lower life totals, your opponent is kind of forced to block at some point, and the majority of the cards in the set are going to be attacks. Like, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it has to be over 50%. So I would assume that by the end it's probably closer to, I don't know, like 75% or more of the cards in the set are attacks. And so when you get to the end game, being able to go like hot streak into Centauri Saber off of one card, you're attacking for 4. But not only are you attacking for 4, you're attacking over the course of attacking for 2 twice. This card is just very powerful, and is gonna help you, I think, win a lot of games. Harry Blade, I think, is also kind of interesting. Where I'm not exactly sure how to evaluate this. If I had access to both Hot Streak and Parry Blade, I'm not sure if I would play Parry Blade over Centauri Saber because I don't know which effect is going to be more powerful. But Parry Blade having Blade Break and basically giving you like an extra 2 life in the end game is really strong ability. Like equipments are already strong, but like the fact that this doubles as a weapon can be really good as well and helping you kind of win the end games. So, being able to block, like let's say if you're at 2, being able to block like your opponent's weapon attack for 3, going to 1 with your weapon, and then swinging back and making them block the last card that they needed to pitch. I don't know if the games are gonna go down to something like that, but I mean, the optionality is pretty nice. That being said, Centauri Saber, I think Centauri Saber's ability is a lot more useful the more 2 block attacks that there are. But my impression is that most of the attacks, except for like the generic attacks, are going to be 3 block, and so this, like the fact that it gets +1 isn't going to be like a huge deal. And so if you have both rare weapons, you probably just end up playing both. All right, that was a lot of words to say. So now let's take a look at equipment. Uh, you're not really going to be getting Balance of Justice. Glory Seeker, I think. I'm not sure. It's probably okay to play in Kasai. You pitch a blue, you draw a card. Your weapon attacks are now free, and so you can filter out your blues. But I wouldn't put it like very high. If you have other alternatives, I think the equipment that blocks are probably going to be much better. Shelter Cove, on the other hand, actually is, I think, pretty nice as a sideboard card. There are not a ton of attack reactions in the set, but there are also no real defense reactions, and so everything that interacts with attack reactions is going to be done either there's going to be instants, and I think Shelter Cove is the only equipment that can turn one of your blue pitch cards into like an instant that prevents 2 damage, and so it definitely seems like it would be really powerful into like Olympia or Kasai, just being able to block out an attack reaction at a crucial point in time seems pretty strong, either if it's on a wager attack or something like that. And then we have a cycle of generic equipments that have 2 blade break, and these equipment are all pretty strong because they block 2, which is very strong for equipment unlimited, but they all have conditions on when they can attack. And so I think I would definitely play them if I don't have like a good alternative. And my strategy towards using these cards would just be to try to block with them as soon as you can, because you might not get multiple opportunities to block with these over the course of the game. And then these you have like these weapons or these equipments that have only have defense in 1v1 limited if you have less life than your opponent, and they're in my mind kind of just like iron rots, but a little bit worse. I think Bloodied Oval is the only one that is like, like really interesting because it occupies the offhand slot, which I am not sure if let's say if you're playing Rhinar or if you're playing Kasai, if you would rather just like use your second slot to play a shield, or if you'd rather have two weapons. I think I lean more towards wanting to play two weapons than to play this shield. I know Iron Rot Buckler was pretty good in Tales of Aria, but I think this card is significantly worse than that card. Um, and these are all the equipment that aren't generics. Let's take a look at the rares and the common. So my impression is that all of the specialization equipments are going to be really strong. So if you open any of these like rare specialization equipment, you know, it's also like a signpost for you to go into that hero. Most of them are either battle worn or like temper that have like a pretty good effect. A knucklehead I think is mostly going to be used just because it's temper 2. Like forget about the action, pretend it doesn't exist. I think if you're in a situation where you're really far behind, you probably want to maybe like gamble uh to roll and potentially get like, you know, one or two extra cards over your base intellect of 4. But the downside is pretty high. If you roll a 4, you're like break even, so you only have like a 1/3 chance of getting a positive effect out of the action, as opposed to always being able to, you know, block for an extra point of damage. Monstrous Veil. This is kind of interesting. It has Battle Worn 1. You know, blocking 1 on equipment is always, you know, pretty strong. Blocking, being able to block whenever you want, unlike some of the other equipments, the generic ones that we just looked at that have conditional times that you can block. So you can always use this to block a relevant hit trigger. It has action, destroy this, draw a card, and then discard a random card. So like similar to Skullhorn. This is pretty cool because it lets you trigger Reiner's hero power for Intimidate, but it's also like kind of high variance. I think the fact that Mandible Claws are token weapons though makes it so that drawing and discarding 6 is really powerful. And I can see it being good in the late game if you saved like if you saved a 6 in your hand, for example, and like activating this, and then being able to attack with Mandible Claw into the ball breaker, you know. Uh, there are some use cases, but definitely I think on a power level scale, I think this is much worse than Knucklehead. Then you have Raw Meat, which this is like conditionally like really powerful. It's like a temper 2 chest. But you need to control both an agility and a might token at the same time, and there aren't a ton of reliable ways to make this happen. So like probably more often than not, this is just gonna be a block 1 on a chest. There's not gonna be, I think, in pure like numbers wise, like not as good as the generic Blade Break 2, Blade Break 2 chest. Stonewall Impasse is a Guardian shield, and it says when this defends clash with the attacking hero, if you win, this gets +1 till end of turn and has temper. This equipment is very strong, and it would be one of the reasons why I would want to play Guardian, just because getting an extra temper 2 piece on top of like what you normally would be able to build in a deck, you get 3 extra life potentially. Sometimes, you know, it's just 1 extra life. But you do get to get, if you get the +1, then, you know, it's just like really strong. It's like blocking for 2. Sometimes it blocks for 3 if you win both clashes. The Victor specialization Golden Glare, has Blade Break 2, and it says when this defends with together with 2 more yellow cards, create a gold token. I think that blocking with 2 or more yellow cards is not going to come up that often because it means that you would be needing to block an attack for like 7 or 8, and you would need to have 2 yellows in your hand at the same time. So I would just treat this as a Blade Break 2 hat that you can use unconditionally, which I think is just pretty powerful by itself compared to the other options. So yeah, if you open this, then definitely take a look at playing Victor. Good Time Chapeau, Betsy Specialization Temper 2. This is probably like one of the most pushed of the rare equipments. It has Temper 2, but then also you get to destroy gold tokens, and you get to wager a Might and a Vigor token with them. And, being able to wager a Might and a Vigor token also lets you turn on Betsy's hero ability, which lets you pay 2 to give it +1 and overpower. So it's going to be really good at multiple periods of time throughout the game. And if I open a Good Time Chapeau, I would like 100% want to be playing Betsy in my seal pool if possible. And then we have our Guardian Boots. This is like very similar to the Brute Chest, where it's like potentially Temper 2 if you control a Might and a Vigor token. I think Stand Ground, if you combo it with the Good Time Chapeau, is actually a lot more reliable. But I think that without the Good Time Chapeau's ability letting you wager both Might and Vigor token, it's like pretty unreliably blocking 2, and most of the time it's just going to be block 1 with Temper. And I would probably rate this also worse than the generic conditional block 2 Blade Break equipment. We have the Olympia Specialization Prize Gallia, which it's Temper 2, and you get an attack reaction. I think this use is going to be way more relevant than like Knucklehead, for example. I think being able to wager weapon attacks as an attack reaction means that it's a little bit more consistent that you get a gold token. I believe Olympia also gives you you get 2 gold tokens when you win the wager, and getting 2 gold tokens I think starts to unlock like a lot of plays that you can do. Um, potentially getting up to like 2 extra resources. So I don't know. I think that the baseline of it being Temper 2 is just very strong by itself. And Kasai has Battle Worn 1. It says attack reaction, banish a red and yellow card from a graveyard, destroy this. Target sword attack gets when this hits, draw a card. This ability is probably the best one out of between like similar equipment, this and the Reinar one, because you usually are going to be hitting when you activate as attack reaction. Like I said, there aren't a lot of like defense reactions in the set, so it's not that often that you get blown out. So being able to spend a resource to get an extra card is very powerful. And I think I'm sensing a trend where I think a lot of the heroes with better hero abilities are getting the stronger rare equipments. Although I think Kayo is kind of an exception, where Kayo has a really strong hero ability. I would argue for limited a stronger hero ability than Reinar, but has I think the better rare equipment. And then Warrior has the weapon, and we already talked about this. I think this is just worse than version. And then we have a couple of hybrid equipments that create have Blade Break, and then they also create tokens. And so I think the agility token equipment seems like it could be the most useful, but I think Might is also really useful. There's some attacks in this set that care about being pumped above their base power, and so my thought is that all of these are decent. I think Vigor Girth is probably the worst one, but I what these hybrid common equipments have over the other equipments is that they kind of have unconditional blocks, so they're going to be more useful when you need to block a relevant hit trigger as opposed to playing the other ones where you kind of have to get lucky that your opponent has like satisfies the conditions for you to use your equipment. All right, that was a lot of words. Okay, let's talk about brute cards and kind of where they fall. So I would say that beast mode. So let's I don't know what the best way to talk about the majestics are. Usually majestics aren't a big part of my limited strategy. Oftentimes they have not been the best cards either. They're more oriented towards constructed play. I think send packing is probably like much better in constructed than it is in limited. In limited, it just seems like a red or sorry, a yellow 3 cost 6 a lot of the times. So it's not that strong. The Reiner specialization, though, I think also it's like you can't like realistically quad intimidate somebody without having access to cards like barraging beatdown. Although this card does work if your opponent spends cards to block with it. So for example, if you intimidate a card and then they block, or sorry, if you intimidate like 2 cards and then they block 6, then it's still gonna get through for 3. So in that case it is pretty decent, but I don't know how reliable this is to get like double intimidate um with this card. It also does kind of hose instants that have to get played. So they reprinted like reinforce the line, for example. So like if they play that, then being able to intimidate maybe the attack that they wanted to block with is pretty good. So I'm not exactly sure. My thought is that I just never like really orient myself towards majestics. Cast Bone, similarly, it's really difficult to build your sealed deck in a way that you get a lot of value out of this. So this is much better card to constructed. I would treat this card as close to unplayable and limited. Reckless Charge gives you a Scabskins roll on a card. If you roll a 6, it just places itself. I think that this is similarly also just like a titanium bauble in limited. I would not really bank on having that work out for you. No Fear, however, this is the majestic that I think is really, really strong if you can put together hands that kind of wanna be, well, if you want to play out like your 3 card or 2 card hand, because what you can do with this card, especially since there aren't a lot of defense reactions, being able to respond to a weapon to a warrior's attack reactions on their weapon or on their attacks, is going to be really powerful. But then also it lets you kind of early on in the game just say like no blocks, and you play this and you banish the rest of your cards in your hand, or if you have this in your arsenal, you just play this and it becomes a 1 card block 5 block 6. And so value wise this is really, really powerful, as long as you are healthy enough to trade the life totals. So I think that No Fear is actually really strong. Talk about rares. Beast mode, this card is I think pretty unreliable. I would not value this card very highly. It blocks 3. Probably the blue one is going to be the best one to play. Although if you can get the intimidate off, then beast mode is pretty good. Being like a 2 card play for 8, but there's not a ton of ways to intimidate without going minus. Unless you get like an agility token, so you get to play. I think they reprinted. We'll get to it in a second. Some attacks that just intimidate by themselves. Pack Call is pretty cool that they printed multiple colors of this, because It lets you kind of set up for clashes. It lets you set up for draw discards. And so I think all the versions are pretty strong. Like the red one, 3 for 7. So these are all pretty good. Um, Rawhide Rumble. I think this card is initially on initial look, it doesn't look to be that great, although it does have the B chest mechanic. Um, so you can choose to discard to intimidate. So with Rhinar, like this is one of the ways you can get double intimidate. It's really good if you can somehow get a vigor token and then swing your weapon, because so then you can like put together like a double intimidate plus 9 damage, which means that you're like for sure going to be able to leak some damage through. Maybe 10 damage if you have the ball breaker or ball buster or whatever it's called. So I think that the red version is probably pretty decent. And I mean the rest of the other two, I mean like you're gonna play them because they block 3, but they're not anything special. Assault and battery, I think this is the formula, which is like pretty strong. So at base, it's 3 for 7, blue is a 3 for 5, yellow is a 6 power attack, and then you get to make an agility token. So agility tokens, I think, are gonna be primarily good to chain together like attacks that have intimidate or something like that in order to put together like a lot of difficult to block or unblockable damage onto a single turn. And so you get to threaten a break point first, so your opponent can't like swing back as hard, and then be able to set up like some more damage that's like really difficult for them to block. I think plays into both the playstyles for Rhinar and Kayo pretty well. With Kayo, you get to also make a might token, so something important. Bare Fangs is very well statted if you can like structure your deck in the right way to have like a lot of 6s. So my thought is that in sealed it's probably not that good in Rhinar, but very good in KO, where it's going to be much easier to hit like the right number of 6s to make this card really good. But like I mean the red one attacks for 7 if you discard a 6. The yellow one attacks for the red one attacks for 8, the yellow one attacks for 7, and with KO's ability you get like an extra might token. So you can add like an extra +1 damage onto it. So it's like the red one is attacking for 9 and the yellow one is attacking for 8, and you like kind of get a little bit out of hand. Akund is just pretty solid brute card overall. I think this card is going to be much better as a card that you kind of set up into. So if you basically you want to kind of arsenal this card and try to set up a situation where you have like let's say like a might and a vigor, or sorry, a vigor and a agility token, so that you can give this go again, and then it costs 1 less, so you attack for 1, you intimidate, and then you get to like do like another attack with 2 resources floating, which is going to be either your weapon or some other 2-cost attack is strong. Downtown making a might token. I think might token and agility tokens are probably going to be the best ones for group, but honestly they're all playable. Wild Ride, similar to Bare Fangs, I think is going to be much better in KO than in Rhinar. So if you get Wild Rides, maybe look into playing KO. Bonebreaker Bellow, on the other hand, I think is much better in Rhinar than it is in KO, because it's a non-attack brute action. You get to discard the card that you want, and then you get to kind of set up this situation where if you have the ball and chain weapon, I forget it, I don't know what it is. Being able to attack for like 9 with an intimidate is pretty good. If you can chain together another intimidate with Bonebreaker Bellow, then you get to do like a ton of damage. And unlike the printed cards similar to this that discard at random, so being able to choose the card that you discard, I think makes it way more consistent in decks that don't have as many 6s in them. It would have been really good. It would have been kind of nuts if you could have played Romping Club and attack for 9 with the Intimidate, but I'm sure that there are some ways that you can choose to kind of play this and set up like pretty strong turn. Smashback Ilhorn. I think this card is pretty good. And I would probably play as many of these as possible. They're blue. They let you set up your turns. Just pretty strong all around. Agility is going to be really good for you to like. I think the way that to think about it is that you want to combo agility with attacks that intimidate, either via discard or via um yeah, either through discarding or they just like have intimidate on them. Pretty sure this. Okay. Oh, and then now we're going to the hybrid cards. This card, talk a big game. I think is really strong for constructed, but don't think it's that relevant and limited beyond being a blue that blocks 3. These clash cards I think are kind of interesting. My first instinct is that most of the clash cards are going to be more reliable in Guardian than in Brute. Although making a My Token is pretty good, and so I would imagine that the red one, the red Clash of Might, is going to be pretty solid in Brute, and obviously you play the blue one because it's a blue 3 block, and the yellow one is probably not as good in Brute, but it could be like pretty good in Guardian. Battered Not Broken is going to be pretty strong, I think, because like what we talked about earlier, there's just not a lot of defense reactions. So being able to have a card that plays on defense and offense together is going to be really solid. I mean it's rare, so you can't like really control how many of these that you get, but I don't think I would ever cut one of these. Being able to play on defense and offense is pretty good, and then you get to put an extra power onto an attack, even if you just attack with your weapon. That 3 going into a 4 just like now presents a break point, so it's going to be much better than just like a +1 would suggest. And then we have Test of Might, which is a block card. These cards are just all of the block cards I think in the format are just like really 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 strong for limited. They're just above rate. They block for 4, and so I would probably lean towards playing as many of them as possible. In my sealed pools, get the chance. Yeah, and then this Wall of Meat and Muscle, this is like kind of similar. So yeah, it's like it's extra benefits off of having Might tokens. Putting attack action cards from your graveyard on top of your deck, just like super strong to just like get more cards, like total cards for your deck. This is similar to like Evergreen. This is similar to I don't know, Rites of Spring. They haven't really printed like a lot of effects like this that let you like kind of like reuse cards from your graveyard, and I think it's because like a large part of Flesh and Blood is going to be based off of fatigue. Uh Especially when you get to these like value oriented like trading type of formats. And so I think this card is really strong. I would never not play it. And then we get to a bunch of kind of interesting attacks that like most cards in the format block 3, but these cards block 2, and so the question is whether or not discarding them is useful. And so I think in Rhinar, I think Mighty Windup is pretty cool because it intimidates, and in Kayo you can get 2 Might tokens. So even though you are spending a card for below rate, it might be more useful to, make your next turn really, really strong by just like making multiple Might tokens to push that turn cycle like above rate. Otherwise, if you're just like swinging like even like 6s and 3s the whole time, your opponent is just going to be able to block, and then you're just going to not really make much progress. But being able to like make 2 Might tokens and then pushing like your attack on the turn, if you let's say also combine it with like an agility somehow, being able to push like one turn to doing like attacking for like 15 or 16, then you're starting to get into the territory of doing something that is going to make it really difficult for your opponent to come back from. And so even like discarding this on your turn instead of attacking might be a reasonable play. Now I probably wouldn't do it with the red one, but definitely like with the yellow one or in Kayo with the blue one, I could definitely see it being better than attacking your opponent, especially if they can't use all 4 or 5 of the cards if they have an arsenal efficiently. And then we have Rising Power. If you've drawn a card this turn, this gets +1. This pretty much only gets turned on by the mini meat axe having a gold token uh, or with something like Wild Ride. And so I guess like the ideal situation is you have Rising Power in your arsenal and you like attack with a Wild Ride, and then you discard a card and you kept the blue, so then you go like this into Mandible Claw into Rising Power is like really really strong, but I think that's gonna happen less often than you think, and so probably just gonna like for consistency's sake, this is one of the worst cards that you could have in your deck because it blocks 2, but I think having the card in your deck is probably still ultimately going to be better than running one fewer card in your deck. Uh, Wage Might. All of the wager cards are pretty interesting. When we did the review of all of the equipments, we see that most of them are like fairly conditional. So you can probably set up a lot of situations depending on how your opponent's equipment suite looks like, where you basically just like always get a might token when you wager, or if they had to block out their whole hand, then they can't like really use the might token anyways. My token is probably the worst one to wager. Probably the best token to wager is going to be agility, because it's going to be the hardest to utilize agility off of hands that blocked 2 or 3 cards. Whereas my token, every hero has the ability to attack with their weapon off of 1 card. And so you're always giving them a +1. So I think my instinct is to feel that Wage Might is going to be kind of like the worst attack to wager. But that being said, the red one presents a breakpoint. You don't have to wager, you just attack for 7. And it's going to be pretty strong. Lead with power. I think a lot of these non-attack actions that make tokens are actually pretty good. This is probably going to be stronger than it appears at first, just because usually like spending 1 on a non-attack action to get like +4 isn't necessarily like the best. But one nice thing that you get to do is that you are presenting a lot of damage when your opponent gives you access to more cards. You're presenting a lot of damage, which is gonna kind of incentivize your opponent to block with more cards from their hand. But you're also like, while you're kind of like dumping your hand, setting up for the next turn as well by creating a might token. And so playing like a lead with power, for example, onto an attack that would have attacked for attacking for 6, you attack for 9. There's some like if you go like lead with power into bare fangs, that's kind of like the nutty buddies. But yeah, like there are some powerful plays that you can do, like playing this into pack hunt, not giving your opponent like the choice of like the full choice over like which cards that they use to block with, and then setting up for the following turn I think is going to be really good. Runner, I think, is going to be one of the best cards in the set, both for constructed and I think also for limited. It's just like it blocks 3, it's a 2 for 6, so it's at rate, and then it has upside. So I mean, if you open one, congrats, but it's a majestic, so it's not really worth talking about too much. Clash of Agility, I think, is going to be much more useful, even though it doesn't present a breakpoint. I think clashing and then like giving them agility is not too bad if you lose, because they either have to take like if they don't block cards, then they're taking like a bunch of damage, and then you can just spend cards blocking, and then like waiting until and you give them 4 cards that they probably can't use fully without an agility token on the next turn, like after the turn after the agility pops. But also just like or sorry, I'm reading the card wrong. This is not when it attacks, when it defends. Yeah, I think blocking and clashing for agility is actually, now that I think not really that great. I guess it could be useful. It's like useful in figuring out if your opponent is going to be attacking multiple times. You can block with a clash of agility and then kind of gauge from that point on whether or not you want to continue blocking cards based off of whether or not you get the agility. You're gonna win more clashes than you are not playing like brute into warrior, for example, but into guardian. I think giving them agility can be a little risky, especially since they can play 2 hammers. If they play 1 hammer and shield, it's probably a lot safer to give them agility. And then take it on the chin. This is like similar to the one that makes a might token. I think this card is really, really powerful. Being able to kind of control when you make agility, the best is going to be if this is like the only card that you use to prevent damage. Although that being said, usually when you're blocking, making might is going to be better than making agility. This is probably much better for warrior than it is for brood, because with warrior you can, at least like you can block 2 cards, play this, block 8 damage on that turn, and then on the following turn swing, both your weapons. So it's gonna be better in warrior than it is in brute. Run into trouble. We said that most of the block cards are really strong. This is kind of one of the only types of effects that exist in the game, where like if you save this for the end of the game and you made an agility token, then you can just kind of finish your opponent off. But honestly, I think it's like much harder to set up because it's a red pitch, so you kind of just like play it as you get it. So I think if it happens to be that you just had an agility token and you get to block with it and do an extra point of damage to your opponent, really powerful. I don't think I would ever cut it because it's a 3 block, but it's not as good as Reckless Swing, if that's like what your comparison is. On the other hand, this card is really, really strong almost all the time. It's always above rate. It always blocks for 4. And then clashing with the attacking hero to make an agility token. If you give them an agility token, it's not the end of the world, because oftentimes what you can do is you can decide after you make your first block on their first attack, if they're assuming they're attacking more than once, you can decide to block less and then attack back for more, and then they're going to be incentivized to not block because they have agility token. And then into warrior, like you're just going to win more clashes than you are on brute. If you play this card in warrior, it's going to be a little bit riskier because I don't think you will run as many attacks as the other heroes. So something to think about. That being said, I don't know if I would ever cut it. I have to play some games in this format to see if clashing and losing the clash is enough of a drawback that just like going above right on the block doesn't kind of make up for that. Agile wind up. We already talked about this with the might tokens. I think making agility token on demand is going to be stronger than making might token in terms of setup potential. So I think this card is really, really good for Kayo. For warrior, I think because you don't get the effects, the additional hero effects from discarding cards, probably not going to be as good. Although you probably wouldn't ever pass up, like a red 3 for 7 or like a blue, just like having like more damage. But I think if you're playing warrior, you could probably pass on the yellow one. We're going through all of the cards for Brute, but I think when we go over the other classes, when we hit these hybrid cards, we'll probably just skip over them if we've talked about it already. Rising Speed is kind of like a fake Zealous Belting. Says if you've drawn a card this turn, this gets go again. So there's not a lot of combos that this is that good with in Brute, other than if you somehow gave like a Bare Fangs go again, and then you got left with a blue and you had this in your arsenal or something like that. And so unless you're like making golds with the generic cards, I think this is not too powerful of a card, and I wouldn't mind cutting it. In Warrior, it's probably a lot better because both Warriors have ways to make gold tokens, and so this card's much better in those heroes. Wage Agility, 3 for 7, you know, pretty strong. Sorry, this is the card that I thought we were talking about earlier, where it says when this attacks a hero, you may wager an agility token with them. So wagering agility when you're attacking is probably like the best token to wager, because if your opponent wants to block, it's the token that they can least get effect out of. Like if you think about it, like the best thing that they can do is have an equipment that blocks for 1, or sorry, the actual best scenario is they have 2 equipments that block for 2, and then they block 1 card, and then they're left with a 3-card hand with agility token. But that's like the only scenario where it's really, really good for them to have the agility token, where if they have an equipment that blocks for 1 and they block 2 cards, it's not as often that they're going to be able to use those 2 cards to make 2 attacks. Now, all the classes kind of can in this format. So like if you're playing Guardian, even if you play like two hammers, like they can keep 2 blues. But in general, if they have to block like 3 cards to prevent you from getting an agility token, then you know they're not really gonna be attacking twice unless they're playing Warrior. And in which case, their turn cycle is gonna be to essentially block 3 cards for 7 and attack for 4, and so they're kind of losing out on that exchange, assuming you don't block the sword attacks. And then lead with speed, making an agility token, giving +3. I think this is going to be really good for both Brute and Warrior as a kind of setup card. Not a ton to say other than you probably want, like, the best way to play cards like this is to probably park it in your arsenal, and then you want to save this until like a turn where you get to arsenal another card that's gonna get a lot of benefit out of having agility token. So that could either be, you know, like an attack that is like really good, so you can string together a bunch of attacks together. You definitely don't want to just like be playing cards like this out of your hand as soon as you draw them. But I would always be playing probably all three pitches of this card. All right, we're on to Guardian. This video has already been an hour long. Betsy specialization, bet big. When this attacks a hero, you may wager a gold, might, and vigor token with them. This card is bananas for Betsy. If you open one, you probably should look at playing Betsy. If you pitch 2 blues and you attack with this, then you can give it overpower, and it becomes 9 overpower. That wagers a gold, might, and vigor token. It's going to be hitting like 90% of the time or more. This card is very strong. Prime to fight. If you control the vigor token, this costs 1 less to play. If you control the might token, it gets +1. This card, if you have the chapeau, is also probably ultimately going to be pretty good, but is much less reliable. That being said, in limited, you know, per card, like amount of damage that you can do throughout your deck is a really big thing. And so just like I think the fact that it attacks for 9 is going to be pretty good by itself. Golden Sun, Victor specialization. You may destroy a gold, and it gets +3 in overpower. And then when you win a clash revealing this, create a gold token. This card is also kind of bananas. So I think like the 2 Guardian specializations, at least for limited play, are going to be much stronger than the Brute specializations. And so if you open either of these in your pool, definitely look at playing heroes. Boast is a blue block card. It says it gets plus X, where X is twice the number of clashes you won this turn. This card is also in limited going to be pretty strong, although probably like fairly situational. Clashing on defense is not that frequent. It's just I think like the hybrid cards and some of the block cards clash on defense. And so I mean like if you get one, it's pretty good to just include in your deck. Is it gonna win you the game? Probably not. It's probably just gonna be solid card. It's a blue. It blocks 3. Trounce. When this defend clash with the attacking hero, put the revealed cards on the bottom of their owner's deck and clash again. If you win both clashes, you get a gold, might, and a vigor token. This card is pretty high variance, but you get a really, really big reward. And the downside is just that it's a red that only blocks. That being said, like most of the heroes can't really use 4 cards on attack super efficiently, and so I think that Trounce is going to be pretty good, and you can sometimes randomly luck your way into basically winning the game. If you win both clashes, especially like if you're Victor and you get to draw an extra card, that exchange itself should probably Colossal Bearing. We have to take a look. I believe that there are a bunch of auras that pump power. It says when they hits a hero, destroy an equipment they control with 1 or less. Not super relevant in limited. I don't think. Much more relevant in constructed, but it is just a big beat stick. 4 resources for 8. If you ever have a vigor token, this card becomes very plus. It having 8 power will help you win more clashes, so probably you're always going to be playing it. Lay down the law. If this has 13 or more power, non-equipment cards get -1 while defending this. I think this card is kind of a win con by itself. So if you open one of these in your pool, I mean it is a rare, so you're not going to get it that often. But if you do open one of these in your pool and you have enough ways to kind of get it up to that 13 power, it might be worth structuring your strategy during the game specifically to try to hit this. It's never going to be that bad in your arsenal because it's always just like a 3 for 7. So if you ever get like caught in a situation where you have to kind of clear your arsenal out, I mean it's never going to be that bad. And so I think this is probably it's not like I don't know if it's like a bomb level card, but I think this is like a clear like win con. Especially if you like play some pumps, like if you have an aura that pumps this, and then you get to play like I don't know, like a wager pump in Betsy, and you get to like overpower. I don't know. It just seems fairly strong. It costing 3 is also really nice. Smack of Reality. This one's a lot easier to get it to hit tower. Destroying all auras they control is a pretty nice response. If you're playing an aura that buffs your attack, then you don't really want to be blocking on the turn, so you're gonna like lose some wagers, and then but if you get to like attack in the back with smack, then really good response to that. Then we have Over the Top. This card I think is also like similarly like a really good finisher at rare as Lay Down the Law. If I have Over the Top in my deck, then and I have like the equipment that makes a might token, comboing these two together is pretty good. Comboing this with a pump that wagers, or just like one of the pumps that makes the tokens, pretty strong. Stacked in your favor, your attack action cards get +3 while defending. This I think is not that good, and I normally don't really like playing these types of cards in my deck if possible. I think I would just play the blue. Command Respect, it says when this hits a hero if it has power greater than its base, destroy a card in their arsenal. I think this common is kind of nuts in Betsy at all of the colors because of the ability to destroy arsenals. I don't know in this format if you would ever want to just kind of play without an arsenal except for like some very specific things. But being able to destroy arsenal on hit and then finding ways to make it difficult to block, I think, is a pretty good recipe for success. Concuss, similar to Command Respect. Instead, it's a discard instead of hitting their arsenal. I actually think that with the way that the format is looking just initially, I would assume that Concuss is going to be a little bit stronger than Command Respect. It's going to be more often that making them discard a card is going to be more valuable than making them destroying their arsenal because they will always have cards in their hand, but they will not always have cards in their arsenal. Thunk says when you win a clash revealing this, create a might token. The blue one is 6 power. This card is pretty good. Just to have in your deck, it's like very high damage per card, but it's below rate. So I think the red copy is not that good. The yellow copy might be good if you have the Victor hat just to block with, but I would only really want to be playing the blue Thunk. Wallop is 4 for 7. Says when you win a clash revealing this, create a Vigor token. Similar to Thunk, I would probably only want to play the yellow and blue ones. And a Big Bop. This is kind of the we were talking about earlier, like the play style. So like one of the ways that you can kind of capitalize on the heroes in this format, this is going to be like I think pretty different from a lot of the other draft formats. If you have been playing Flesh and Blood Limited in the past, I think many of the recent formats, except maybe for Outsiders, it was not too hard for most of the heroes to kind of dump their whole hand. But I think in this format, it's not that easy to dump your whole hand. Most of the things that you do are just like 2-card plays. And so you want to be blocking a lot of the time to get efficiency. So being able to play an aura and then setting up for the next turn, I think is actually really strong. And so even though like per card, it's not as efficient, I think being able to deny efficiency from your opponent by not attacking with them and not letting them block cards, sometimes you can get an extra +3 on that. So this is potentially like a 2-card 8 that has like a wager attached to the attack. Really strong, I think, for Betsy. Probably okay for Victor as well. And we have Bigger Than Big, same thing, but with a might token. I think wagering might tokens is going to be better than wagering bigger tokens on average. When you're pairing it with, a huge guardian attack. It's a little bit different than in the case of the brutes because it's just representing like a much larger portion of like the person's life total. So there's a lot more life thresholds that they're going to be at where they're kind of forced to block most of the cards. And then in order for them to kind of block out like a +5 onto a guardian attack, they're going to have to block out their whole hand. Whereas if you wagered a brute attack that's attacking for 6 or for 9, your opponent could just block 3 cards. So that's the main difference in reasoning between the two. I'm not 100% sure for these auras that buff what the total value is, but my inclination, if I'm right, where the fact that people are going to be playing some block cards, the fact that it's going to be hard to like dump your whole hand, is that probably even the blue versions are going to be somewhat playable as quote unquote on rate if you factor in your opponent kind of wasting cards. And I think that the yellow and red ones are probably at rate or they're going to be at rate or better most of the time. Um, so we talked about a lot of these cards already, all of the Brute Guardian cards we talked about, so we just got to talk about the Guardian Warrior cards. So Double Down says you may destroy gold rather than pay its cost. And it says the next attack that wagers gets +3 and overpower. And then you get like twice the number of tokens dead. I am not 100% sure how good this is. It seems like very situational, and so my thought is that in limited it's not that good. Clash of Vigor. Clash of Vigor is actually, I think, really strong in Guardian, all of the versions of it, and in Warrior too, but for different reasons. I think for Guardian, there's a bunch of attacks that have a resource breakpoint of 4, and then so being able to like block with this clash, you're gonna win more clashes more often than not when you're playing Guardian, and then being able to pitch like one card instead of having to have 2 cards is really good. And a Vigor token is really like the one that you want to get, while Vigor and Might are the ones that you want to get while you're blocking. And Agility is, I think, much worse than getting Vigor or Might. So I think Clash of Vigor is pretty strong for that reason. Slap Happy, similar to like the other 2 cards in the cycle that we reviewed. I think Vigor and Might are going to be the 2 best versions of this, like instant that prevents 2 damage, and Agility is probably going to be like the worst of the 3, just due to the fact that you get the token on blocking rather than on attacking. I think on attacking it flips, and Agility and Vigor are better than Might, and Might becomes like the worst one on these like conditional effects. Well, this is non-conditional, but just like in which phase of the attack blocking cycle that you're making the tokens. So this is a block that says when this defends, if you control a Vigor token, gain 1 life. Gaining 1 life is actually really strong because it kind of beats a breakpoint, and so Hardy block, I think, if you ever proc it, it's gonna be really good. Otherwise, it's just gonna be like a block card that you put in your deck to kind of play around overpowers. Test of Vigor, defending and making Vigor tokens, clashing. We talked about this already, this concept. Blocking and conditionally making a Vigor token is much better than attacking and conditionally making a Vigor or a Agility token. So test of Vigor is going to be better. So like for the blocking flash cards, Vigor and Might are going to be better than Agility. I think Vigor is kind of like the break even. I think Vigor is like okay on both sides, but definitely Agility is worse in clashes when you're blocking, better when you're attacking, and Might is better in clashes when you're blocking and worse when you're attacking. Rising Energy is a 2 for 6, and it says if you draw on a card, this costs 1 less to play. This card is actually really good to combo with golds, and all 3 pitches of Rising Energy are really good to play with gold. So if you are in a situation where you can make golds, I think this card is kind of an auto include. In Guardian, so like a little bit more awkward. I think I would probably play the blue ones as resource cards, but I don't know if I would play the red and yellow ones. Vigorous Wind Up, discarding to create a Vigor token. I think I would play the red version of this as a 3 for 7 and just hope to never block or discard this. I think creating Vigor tokens to setup is not as powerful as creating Might or Agility tokens on setup. Then you have Wage Vigor. Attacking a hero, waging a Vigor with them. This, I think, is probably fine as a 3 for 7, like incentivizing your opponent to block with 3 cards. We said Vigor is kind of the break even. Lead with Heart. Making a Vigor token, giving your next Guardian a Warrior attack +3. This card is, I think, just really good for both. I think all of the cycle of these pumps that make tokens unconditionally are just gonna be really strong. All right, we're almost done. We just gotta take a look at warriors and generic attacks. Blade Flurry says target weapon attack is +2, and then it says your next weapon attack this turn gets +2. Really depending on how often you can get go again on your weapon. For this card to be good, if you can get go again really consistently, then this card is kind of nuts, being an attack reaction and kind of providing 4 points of value. But I think that while this is certainly going to be like a really strong card for like Dorinthia and Classic Constructed, it's not as reliable in limited. But the fact that there are no defense reactions in the set makes it so that all attack reactions have some amount of value as being able to push damage through and denying your opponent denying your opponent the equity of knowing how much damage is coming through initially, so that they block accordingly. And so I think Blade Flurry is a Majestic that's pretty playable, although I don't know if it's kind of slam dunk in limited. If the Tide of Battle says target a warrior, attack with power greater than space gets go again, and the next time opposing heroes dealt damage, make an agility token. I think this is probably going to be better in this is probably going to be better in than it looks initially. So essentially it's like one card, you get 2 go agains, but every time you get a go again in warrior, you essentially get like a +1 damage because you have 2 weapons that attack for 2, as opposed to kind of like the default, which is like you spend an action point and you get to attack for 3 plus like however many cards that you spend. So I think Shift the Tide of Battle, if you pair with other attack reactions, is honestly pretty strong. And then the fact that it's an attack reaction means that you can, save it in your arsenal and like use it for like an optimal time. Up the ante, you get to wager up to 3 times, and you get to give an attack up to +3. It's a blue, it blocks 3. It's an Olympia specialization. I don't actually know if I would go into Olympia for this card. It doesn't seem that powerful. It doesn't seem that powerful in terms of being able to kind of win games on its own. And so the fact that it's an attack reaction that can be used that you can be pitched to the late game and set up like +3 over the top might be why I'm wrong. And so if the format ends up being like very grindy and you can just like pitch this and set it up, then in that case I could see wanting to go into Olympia. So the more that I talk about it, the more I'm kind of convincing myself. Yeah, I think Up the Ante in limited is really good. In constructed, I think it's not as powerful, but in limited, the fact that there's not a lot of necessarily like a ton of breakpoint action going on, there's not a ton of ways for you or your opponent to just like efficiently like keep dumping your hands to shorten the game. I think that pitching this to the end of the game and then getting +3 at the end, in addition to, I don't know, the tokens are maybe like a little bit less relevant, but still having agility token and vigor token, I think just the agility token makes it so that you get to like attack with your swords like twice. Yeah, I think Up the Ante is actually pretty good in limited. Okay, I've gone 180. I think if I open Up the Ante, I would have a strong preference towards trying to go into Olympia. Remaining performance, you just give your next attack +3, and then it says when this is defended by one or more attack action cards, destroy a card in the defending hero's arsenal. I think this card is going to be way more useful in constructed than unlimited. I think in limited, it's not that clear to me right now how often you're going to be having arsenals in the first place. It doesn't seem like there's like a ton of cards that are great in the arsenal in this format currently. And so you probably like would rather be blocking more often and not arsenaling, but yeah, that's how I feel about it. You probably you just always play it, but it's not as strong, I think, as it might seem when you compare it to how useful it is in Classic Constructed. Raise an army, I think, kind of similarly. I don't know how easy it is for Kasai to make like a ton of gold tokens. If you could play Raise an Army in Olympia, I think it would be really, really good. But you can only play in a Kasai. The Centauri Sellsword tokens are pretty strong if you ever get let me just look at bring it up. So Centauri Sellsword, if you can give your attack go again, then you just like convert like one resource into 3 damage with go again. And so if you're able to even make I think like 3 of them, it's pretty GG's for your opponent. How easy it is to make 3 gold token and just like kind of sit on them, I don't know. And then you have to give your weapon attack go again in order to attack with your Centauri Sellswords. So my thought on Raise an Army is probably way better in Classic Constructed, where you can kind of fill your deck with abilities, with cards that give your weapons go again. But I think in Limited, you're going to not have that many of those effects, or at least not many that you can kind of save until the end of the game. And so I think that Raise an Army is probably decent, but not that powerful. Cut the Deck is kind of like a what's it called? Stroke of Foresight, but it lets you put a card from your arsenal onto the bottom of your deck. So this card is actually pretty cool. I think most of the attack reactions are just going to be really strong in general for like pushing damage through, but I think this card is pretty cool in the sense that there's a lot of cards that seem like they're not like great arsenal like block cards. If your opponent doesn't attack, like you don't really want to arsenal them, but being able to like put a card that's like a bad arsenal card onto the bottom of your deck, I think is really powerful. So I think Cut the Deck is just going to be really good for in all 3 colors in Limited. For both its ability just as an attack reaction to push damage through, and then also for the flexibility. Fatal Engagements is play this only if an attack action cards depending this chain link target attack gets +5. I think the blue version of Fatal Engagement is a really strong finisher, being able to have like a +3 attack reaction in the late game. I think that the red version of this card is very high variance, and you might end up sitting on 1 copy in your arsenal the whole game if your opponent kind of knows about it and is playing around it accordingly. But giving an attack +5 is really powerful. I would just be careful of playing too many of these in your limited deck, but it's very unlikely that you get multiples because it is. So it is probably very good, and you probably just want to keep your arsenal clear the whole game until you draw Fatal Engagement. Put it and park it in your arsenal and just wait until the right time. Take the upper hand. Another 0 cost attack reaction, only if you've wagered. I think similarly, these like conditional attack reactions, just like you just want to keep your arsenal clear the whole game until you get a chance to play them. Agile Engagement is another attack reaction. It gives +3 in the red version. It costs 1. It says if it's attack defended by attack action card, create an agility token. This is pretty good. I think making agility tokens is strongest in a warrior because you can convert your agility token even on a 1-card hand. And so I think this card is just pretty strong in general. I don't know how good the blue one is because it does only block for 2. But I think the red and the yellow ones, being able to push damage through blocks, pretty powerful. Making vigor tokens is much worse than making agility tokens, probably for warrior, but This one, I think Vigorous Engagement, I would only really want to play the red version if possible. Blue and yellow. Blue, I mean, maybe if you need like the blue cards to fill out your resource curve, like enough resource cards for your deck. But I would not want to play the yellow one as much. Or, I mean, like, you might still play it, but it's not as appealing. Draw swords. Your next warrior attack this turn gets +3. Draw a card. Go again. This card I think is primarily good in Kasai. I am not really sure how many blues that you would have to run. Like you would have to have a lot of blues to make draw swords really good in Olympia, I think. But you know the yellow and blue versions could probably are satisfactory for pitch. And so maybe that in itself is good enough. Edge ahead says your next warrior attack this turn gets +3, and when this attacks a hero, you may wager an agility token with them. We talked about this before. This card is kind of like Warrior's Valor. It's just like super strong. This is probably one of the best commons that you could open and want to play Warrior. Wagering agility tokens on attack, we talked about it again and again, is just it's one of the best things to wager. And so yeah, I mean, play as many copies as you can. They're commons. Engage Swiftblade. It says your next warrior attack is +3, and if it's defended by an attack action card, this gets go again. So here's like another cool thing that's you know, your opponent is incentivized not to block when you play this, so it's probably going to be good towards the late game. And so I think the blue I think the blue copy of Engage Swiftblade is most likely going to be the best copy, as you can pitch it and like save it for go agains for the late game. The red version is kind of below rate, and so I think the red and the yellows I would probably just end up blocking with them more than trying to play them out, unless you know you comboed it with other unless you comboed it with like other pumps like wagers, so that your opponent is incentivized to block. Hold'em is less good than like wagering vigor is less good than wagering agility, but I think it is still somewhat playable. I think more often than not, winning the vigor wager is not going to be as good, but I can see Hold'em being really good in Olympia, because I think in Olympia when you win wagers you get gold tokens, and you could probably convert the gold tokens into, I don't know, into something. So if you can convert the gold tokens into value, then you know Hold'em is pretty good for Olympia. I think for Kasai it's not as strong. I think Vigor in general is not as strong for Kasai. Goblet of Blood Run Wine, making agility and a Vigor token. I think this card is playable, but not like that impressive. I think making an agility token is really good for setup. Making a vigor token for setup, I think, is not as good. If it was agility and might, it would be kind of nuts for warrior, but I think that's why they made it agility and vigor. And then we talked about most of these cards already, and so that's kind of the set in a nutshell for all the class cards. I'm gonna talk about the generics. Most of these generics have to do with gold. They have some kind of relationship to gold synergies. Nasty Surprise, gonna be really good for constructed. It's not usually gonna be that relevant. In limited, there's not a lot of effects that make you discard. Although you know it's pretty good counter if your opponent attacks you with that guardian attack that makes you discard if its power is buffed. Most of the time it's just a blue block 3. Pay up. Kind of punishing a lot of the heroes for making gold tokens. I think this card is gonna always make the cut in every deck that you play. You know, it does 6 damage. It blocks you 3, and the potential upside of, you know, getting overpower, like punishing your opponent potentially for Losing clashes with Test of Strength, I think that we're gonna talk about as we come up to it, is gonna be pretty good. Ripple Away. I mean, the art on this is really cool. The effect is not super relevant unless your opponent is making multiple tokens via one effect. Um, so I mean, like, I think it's just a blue block 3 for like 99% of the time in limited. Standing Order. This card is actually really strong. Because heroes can't really use 4 cards that often, being able to like, you're gonna end up with bad arsenals some amount of the time, and being able to kind of reset your arsenal is really strong. That being said, this is a Majestic. I'm pretty sure this is gonna be classic constructed playable, so if you open one, congrats, you don't have to buy one in the future. Tenacity says when this attacks, it gets plus X, where X is the number of defending cards on the combat chain. I think this is another card that's primarily going to be good in Classic Constructed. It seems really good for Ninja. I think there's not that many times in this format where you're just going to have a lot of go again to be able to kind of make use of Tenacity. Although it's kind of cheeky if you have an agility token on Guardian and you throw a big attack, they block like, 3 cards, and then you play this card 5. The amount of times that this is going to come up is going to be much farther than the amount of times that you're just going to play it as a 3 block. And it's fine. It's just a 3 block, but just evaluate it as such. Seduce Secrets. Look at the top. Look at target hero's hand on the top card of their deck, and if it was played from Arsenal, draw a card. I think that this card is close to unplayable. It's not unplayable, but it's close to unplayable. But maybe this card is gonna be pretty good in some constructed deck. I have no idea. Down but not out. This card's a little bit confusing as to how exactly it works. I'm not sure if the equipment and token number gets added together and that's what you're comparing, or if you need both fewer equipment and fewer tokens in them. But it's like a really good finisher, and I think like the blue version of this is going to be really good, and even the yellow version if your hero is one that is okay with pitching yellows. But I think that down but not out is gonna be really good in limited, just to like wait until the end of the game as like a finisher. Um yeah, just like being able to tag, like the blue one attacks for 6 overpower, the yellow one attacks for 7 overpower, like in second cycle, being able to set up a situation where you're lower life than them. Yeah, it just really depends if the equipment and token number gets added together, or if you need both fewer equipment and fewer tokens. If you need both fewer equipment and fewer tokens, it might be kind of difficult to satisfy the token clause in the end game. Wage Gold. I think this card is just like really good in the red version as a 3 for 7. Blue, you can play it as a resource card. Yellow is a little bit awkward. Waging Gold is probably one of the worst wagers to lose. So, but the fact that it's universal, Wage Gold is, in my opinion, probably going to be best in Warrior as a way for you to utilize vigor tokens. So being able to like play Wage Gold for 2 cost and then playing an attack react with the last floating resource that buffs like warrior attacks, I think is going to be like the primary way that this gets like extra value in warrior. And warriors making gold tokens seems pretty strong. So I think if you're playing Kasai, like making gold tokens is going to be like really powerful in general. So might be something to think about if you get red wage gold in your sealed pool. Like maybe you are leaning towards playing it in Kasai. Reinforce the Line is a old card from Crucible War that got reprinted. Its primary use, I think, in this format is going to be to get around Overpower or Attack Reacts. And so in that case, both the red and the yellow ones should be pretty good. The blue copy of this card is probably a lot less playable, and I would not want to play them if you could avoid it. Although if you had absolutely no effects like Reinforce the Line, it's probably good to sideboard in, a couple of copies into if somebody's playing Betsy or if they're playing, like a warrior that plays attack reacts. Adrenaline Rush used to be really good in Monarch as a card, especially in Bolton, being able to have like a card that buffed itself and be able to give it a go again with Bolton's hero ability made it really powerful. In this format, I think it's a little bit less good. You can usually manage a situation where the Adrenaline Rush is going to be active, but when you can't, attacking for 4 for 2 cards is not the best. I think that the primary upside would be to like kind of give a way to use agility tokens that you have to, like if you had to take life, if you had to trade life in order to play a card that has an effect that makes an agility token, then Adrenaline Rush helps you kind of like catch up in the race. If you can somehow give Adrenaline Rush go again while you have less life than your opponent, it is really, really strong. Otherwise, it's not that great. Performance bonus, I think, is one of the only good Arsenal cards in the format. So I think in general, it's somewhat playable in all the decks. Just for that purpose, and if you see it, if you see it in your pool, then slotting even I think the yellow and the blue ones are fine. Like attacking with the yellow from your arsenal is not too embarrassing, and the blue one you can always use as pitch and then set it up for an end game where if your opponent is at 1 life, then they still have to spend a card to block it, and it has go again. Rally the Rear Guard, pretty interesting. A pretty interesting card. I believe it works with Kayo, so you can use this to discard a 6-power attack, and then get a might token for your turn. So honestly, pretty good in Kayo. I think I am not sure how good it is in the other heroes, but it is a card that can play around attack reacts, although it does only block for 2 and is an attack, so a little bit awkward to block like Centauri Sabers with Rally the Rear Guard, a little bit awkward to block Guardian attacks with Rally the Rear Guard. Being able to use it to like convert like 2 blocks into 5 block was one of the main reasons why it was really good in Monarch. Also acting as a popper for Phantasm. But I think in this format it's a lot worse than it was in Monarch, especially the red version. Although, like I said, I think red and yellow are both decent in KO. Trade In, I think, is a really strong card for KO and Rhinar because they get additional effects on discard. But I think for the other heroes, honestly, you just play it as a go again attack. And the fact that it doesn't make a gold token when it hits, I don't think is necessarily as important when you compare it to performance bonus, but it is definitely worse for the other heroes than performance bonus most of the time. I think if the format ends up being largely driven by fatigue or running out of cards, especially in sealed, that you don't really want to be discarding cards to draw cards most of the time. Lunging Press at common is actually like a really good card for helping you push through damage on your wagers, and this is the only generic attack reaction in the limited format, and attack reactions, because there's no defense reactions, are pretty strong, and so I would almost always want to play at least 1 copy of this card if I opened one. And so I'd be pretty happy about putting this in my deck and using it at an opportune time. And it always pitches for 3 and can block 2. Money where your mouth is. Next attack gets +3, and you may wager a gold token with them. I think wagering gold tokens is not as good, except in the heroes that can make good use of gold. In Victor, it seems really insane if you can somehow also give the attacks overpower. So like comboing money where your mouth is with that. I think it's is it a guardian attack that gets overpower if it has greater power? Yeah, if you combo over the top with money where your mouth is, that is a really good combination. Especially in Victor. So if you had a Vigor token, you can even do that with off of just 1 blue. So I think really good in Victor, probably pretty good in Kasai. In Olympia, it's just a wager card, so it probably interacts decently with his hero ability as well. I would not want to play it as much in the Brutes or in Betsy. It's also good because it wagers so you can pay 2 to give overpower. So I think primarily, even though it's a generic, primarily a Guardian and Warrior card. And we have starting stake. If you control no gold tokens, create a gold token. I don't think this card is very good, but it is probably pretty playable in Victor. So if you get like a bunch of these, being able to make multiple gold tokens to help you win those clashes, and you get to draw extra cards. But I don't know. I mean, like in Victor, if you play this as the last card in your hand, you're gonna draw a card off of his hero ability, and you get to arsenal a random card. How good arsenaling a random card is, I don't know exactly. It's probably not that good. But it's a play that's available to him that isn't available to any of the other heroes with starting stake. And lastly, test the strength. This is, I think, one of the cards that most people are kind of clamoring about. This card is really good in Victor, and I think it is pretty good in most of the other heroes. I might want to play this in Warrior, even though I'm going to have fewer attacks than my opponent just because it blocks 4, and giving them a gold token doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily bad for you. But I would, for example, sideboard out Test of Strength if I was playing Warrior into a Victor, and I might sideboard out Test of Strength into Kasai as well if you're also playing Warrior, where it's a little bit more random. But if you're playing like Guardian or Brute and you have Test of Strength, I don't think I would sideboard Test of Strength out. Maybe into Victor I would sideboard out Test of Strength playing Brute, but I don't think I would sideboard it out with any other of the other heroes. So this has been a almost 2-hour long video, and I hope that you guys have enough time to kind of listen to this at 1.5 or 2 times speed. So good luck to everybody who's going to the Queenstown Calling or just the world premiere, and I hope that you guys found this useful.